The most common question I get is how to do a realistic interior in Lumion. So I'll walk you through my process for getting realistic results in Lumion for interior renders, including the render presets, and I'll show you my 7 steps for a realistic interior in Lumion. Let's start with number 1, references. Let's say you already have your room modeled, but now you're not sure what to do with it. This is where references play an important role in your design. For this scene, I know I wanted to make a Japandi interior style. This Japandi style, it's a merge of Japanese and Scandinavian, and it mixes earth colors with minimalist Scandinavian design. I went to Pinterest, which is a great source for gathering references and inspiration, and started my research for a Japandi style living room. When you open any image on Pinterest, on the bottom it shows you all the similar results, which is quite handy. You can even create a new board with just the Japandi style references. By the way, you can follow me on Pinterest and check my boards. I have tons of references there. I like to create mood boards with my image references. And for this, I use a tool called PureRef. You can download it for free at pureref.com. I just drag and drop the images here and then organize them into small groups. Now, looking at these references, I noticed that the plants are either dry or very low and dark saturated greens. Something to keep in mind when later building the scene. Now that we have our references, we move to the next step, 3D modeling. You have your idea and have modeled your room. What's next? After importing it in Lumion, now you need to fill it with objects to start building the scene. So naturally, you start modeling all the 3D objects yourself, right? Well, not exactly. There are tons of websites with ready-to-use, realistic 3D models, and you should only model any object if you can't really find it online, or if the object won't take much of your time to model it. For example, I like this poof, and since it's quite simple, I went ahead and took literally 1 minute to model it. The same goes for the dining table and the coffee table. Pretty simple furniture that takes no time to model. As for the sideboard, I just repurposed the small model I had and rescaled it to fit the scene. Other objects like the sofa, ceiling lamps, TV furniture, and even the bowl of figs I got from online libraries. It saved me a lot of time. And don't stick with just one site to get your 3D models. In this project, I got my models from different sites like 3D Sky, Polygon, Megascans, and Evermotion. High-quality models make a big difference in your final design. Let's say I have exactly the same scene, but with low-quality models and without much thought put into it. You can see how it looks really bad in comparison to the high-quality ones. And not only you should use high-quality models, but you should be an interior designer as well. Think of the proportion of your objects for the room you are designing. Sometimes you see a great model like this sofa on a white background and it looks great. But now you add it to your scene and you see how it not only doesn't fit my interior style, but also it's way too big for this room, making it feel cluttered. This is one of the advantages of downloading assets from online libraries. If you were to model this sofa, it will take a lot of time to then realize it doesn't work at all. Like this, I just search for a better one that will fit the design and don't waste time. And the next step is building everyday life into a scene. After you have done step number 2, as with everything that a computer makes, it's all perfect. The chairs are perfectly aligned, the edges are with a sharp 90-degree angle, and the surfaces are perfectly clean. This is the part where you look around you and analyze how surfaces are in the real world. Probably full of imperfections, some scratches, and small dents. Look at your desk. Is it a 90-degree sharp edge? Probably not. There isn't anything with these sharp edges in real life. That's where you come in. You can start building this everyday life into your scene. Rotate the chairs and move them slightly. Move and rotate the TV furniture drawers. Do you see these paintings? To make them look like they are not simply glued to the wall, I've rotated them vertically so it looks like they are hanging on the wall. Do this in every scene, but in a very small amount, or else it will look like everything is crooked, and that's not the image you want to pass. You can also add some personal objects to suggest that someone actually lives here. A blanket on the sofa, a book, or a notepad, all of these details tell a story and help you create a realistic scene. Do the same for the edges. For everything that you see with a sharp 90-degree edge, you can either bevel the edges in the 3D model application that you use, or you can simply do this in Lumion. Select the material. Now in the material properties, click on this arrow at the bottom to open up the advanced settings. Now go to the fourth icon that looks like a clock and you will see an option called Edges. Just drag the slider to have some bevel. This creates a highlight on the beveled areas, which helps with the realism. As for the surface imperfections, you can add them to Lumion by using decals. But actually, let's hold on to the surface imperfections for a while, because it will be part of the next step, materials. And by the way, if you want to take your renders to the next level, you can join my Lumion Render course. The link will be in the description below. So, about the materials, one of the biggest advantages of using real-time applications like Lumion is that you can apply any material and see in real time how that works. You have thousands of options to choose from: wood materials, marble, concrete. All of these play an important role in your design, and even small differences make a huge impact on your room. And again, by using Lumion, even if a wood texture has almost the right color, you can even adjust the saturation, for example, if you feel the final design will benefit from it. Also, the materials should have balance. Don't simply use the same marble throughout the room, use moderation so you can make some elements stand out. With that being said, instead of going to Google and searching for a texture and applying it to your project, I recommend using PBR materials. These materials have the correct physical values and it saves you the guesswork. With PBR materials, you simply load the textures into Lumion and that's it. There's nothing else you need to do. You can go have a coffee now and relax. There are plenty of sites you can get these materials from, and I'll leave a few in the description below. But let me now guide you step by step on how you can download and apply a PBR material from Polygon website into Lumion. So head over to polygon.com, now click here on Textures, and if you just want to test it first, you can click on this section that says Free. I'm going to select this wood flooring, and when you click you can see here the dimensions, 2.9 by 2.9 meters. Lumion mapping scale is in meters, so we'll add the same value of 2.9 to our material later. I'll select the 4K resolution, and under the download options, I have here several maps. For Lumion, I need the diffuse, displacement, gloss, normals, and reflection. Now, before we apply the material in Lumion, do you see this reflection from the exterior? This is because we don't have the reflection control on our scene. We need to go to Tools, and then select this sphere called Reflection Control. Place it in the center of the room. Now it's reflecting correctly. Let's load each map in the correct slot inside Lumion. With Polygon, you need to invert the normal map. And to invert it, you just click here on the texture and now go to the right where you see a bigger preview. And on the top, click Flip Normal Map Direction. Now it's with the correct lighting. To load the reflection map, you first need to select this icon which says Texture Masks Reflectivity. Now you can load the map. Finally, we can add a value of 2.9 meters on the map scale, which is what we saw on the Polygon site. By the way, you notice I selected the 4K resolution, right? There are other options you can select like 2K or 1K. See the render with 1K resolution, and now with 4K resolution. You need to use your best judgment when it's needed a higher resolution for your materials. For objects that are further away from the camera, you can use 1K texture so that the difference would be so noticeable. In Lumion materials, you can see which texture resolution a material has by hovering over the material name and seeing the 1K, 2K or 3K at the end. This indicates the texture resolution. Another mistake I often see is using the wrong scale. Let's take the wood floor from Polygon site as an example. We saw it as 2.9 meters. So if I apply a map scale value of 10, this will result in an unrealistic texture and not so realistic render, right? Usually you can get away with a 10 to 15% scaling difference, but more than that and you are damaging your scene. Another common problem is texture repetition. Usually you can hide this problem when adding furniture and other elements, or we can use surface imperfections. Remember I told you we would come back to this subject. Now it's a perfect time. You can use decals to add surface imperfections to both add realism to your scene and help break the texture repetition. Let's add some decals by going to Effects, Decals. And here you select from the big variety they have. You see this section, Wall Paint. This worked great to give some variation to the wood floor. I'll make it look like it's with some areas cleaner than others. And if the selection of decals Lumion has is not enough, you can import your own custom decals by clicking this Lumion logo. Now, on the top right corner, I'll expand the settings by clicking on this arrow, and I'll import some scratches. I've downloaded mine for free from ambienceg.com. You can search here imperfections and select the one you like. Now, back in Lumion, I import the texture and adjust some of the values. And this is the before and after. Now that you have added high quality materials to your scene, we move to the next step, which is composition. When you are taking a new render, you are basically a photographer. In each shot, you have to get the best angle to promote the best out of your design. And as any photographer, you need to understand the basics to be able to get a good shot. There are 3 things you need to master: focal length, exposure, and rule of thirds. Focal length is the angle of view. A lower value will result in a larger field of view, but it will have a lot of distortion. This is a good example of how focal length changes our perception. Do you see how different the face of this character looks if we go from 10 mm to 100 mm? The same applies to an interior space. Using a 10 mm focal length will make a room look bigger, and it allows you to show the whole space in one shot. But the image doesn't look nice, and you don't need to show the whole space in one shot. You can use 30 mm for this room and instead take 2 or 3 renders showing different spaces of the room. You can even use a 50 mm focal length to take some detailed shots with a nice depth of field. A lower focal length works well on small and tighter spaces, like a small bathroom for example. Let me show you how you can select focal length in Lumion. Click on the photo mode icon in the bottom right corner. Then if you hover over the image, you see a new menu shows up on the bottom. Here on the focal length, you can either drag the slider to increase or decrease, or you can double left click, it will turn red. Now press backspace and insert the value you want. These 2 buttons on the left, it's for adjusting the horizontal perspective, and the other one is to set your camera height to 1.6 meters. I recommend using a lower value, between 1 to 1.3 meters, it's the ideal. There is one effect you should always add when taking renders at the human height level, the 2-point perspective. This will make your vertical line straight, resulting in a better image. Don't use it when taking aerial shots, as you see the image gets really distorted. The next thing you need to master is exposure. This is the amount of light you let in the camera sensor. The higher the exposure, the more light you'll have on your scene. So if your scene is too dark, you can increase the exposure to compensate. To adjust this value in Lumion, in photo mode, click on Effects, then Camera and select Exposure. Now you can simply drag the slider to increase or decrease the exposure. And lastly, use the rule of thirds. If you imagine dividing a photo into 9 equal zones using horizontal and vertical lines, that forms your rule of thirds grid. You can place the most important parts of your image along these lines for a better render. Lumion already has this compositional helper built in to guide you. If you right-click on the render region in photo mode, you can see these horizontal and vertical lines show up. That's your rule of thirds. So you see how I can move the camera and place these items along the lines to have a better image. Now that you set up all your cameras, you are ready for the next step: lighting. One of the main problems I see when people try to create realistic interiors in Lumion is that they only rely on the daytime lighting, nothing else. You shouldn't be afraid of using artificial lighting to complement. With Lumion, it works quite well for interiors. Take this interior for example. I'm using spotlights for ceiling lights, and these 2 lights, I rotate them slightly to the wall, so we have more lighting detail on this same wall. You can see that these 2 lights are not exactly in the place as the ceiling lights, but sometimes you need to fake it to have better results. I'm using a line light here, and a very important tip, rotate them like this, because since the area lights and line lights don't have shadows, this way it creates the illusion of the shadow and reduce the fall off of the light, so it's not lighting the whole scene. Remember, this light is just an accent light. Now about these lamps here. You see they have this effect like they are turned on, right? If I just have a spotlight inside, you see that they look like the light is turned off. To fix this, we just need to add an area light on the top of the lamp, make it really small and reduce the fall off. Now duplicate this light, move it down and rotate so it's pointing upwards. And now we see that we have this effect like it's turned on. One final note, for this effect to work, you need to set your lamp material waxiness to the maximum. I usually add an area light by the window to boost light from the exterior to the interior. I leave it with the default color temperature, which is daylight, and increase the fall off so it doesn't light up the whole room. Remember, it's good to have a balance between light and dark areas. And finally, I had a spotlight. You can use this one, lamp 23. It will have the same effect as the area light, but it creates shadows and highlights, especially here on the ceiling. Oh, I almost forgot. I only use emissive lights to show that the light is turned on. Just add about 10–20% of emissiveness. Don't overdo it, or else it will look too bright and unrealistic. Now that you light up the scene, what else is missing? The render effects. As I said in the beginning of the video, I'll guide you step by step which effects to use and the settings you should adjust. So the next step is Lumion Render effects. Lumion makes your life easier by giving you render styles. When you are in photo mode, just click this button that says Custom Style. Since we are making an interior, I'll select the interior style. Let's just take a render with this render style and see how it looks. Well, it's not too bad. You see that by following the first steps of good 3D models and high quality materials and a great composition, we already have a good image in seconds. Let's see what we can adjust on this preset to make it better. On the shadow, increase the coloring to about 20%, then the brightness, leave it at about here. Omni shadow, this is where many people have that super dark corners on the walls, because this effect is all the way to the maximum. And as you see, it doesn't make the image look better. I usually leave it at about 0.1 for interiors. On the shadow correction, you can leave this setting all the way to the left, the rest leave it as it is. Next is skylight. As the name says, it's the amount of light from the sky. For interiors, I use the first slider to the maximum, so I have the most amount of light possible. The second slider is how much your shadows will be affected by the skylight in color. So a higher value will result in a more bluish scene, and a lower value a more neutral scene. I recommend using this in a higher value only when you are rendering a blue hour scene. So let's leave this one at about 0.6. We don't need these two toggle options for the interior, and the render quality set it to ultra. This will make your render times higher, but it will have a better quality. Next is hyperlight. This effect creates light bounces on your scene. The higher the value, the more light bounces and the brighter your scene will be. Since my window is quite large, I will decrease this to about 25%. If you have smaller windows, you can probably go for about 50%. As for the reflection, here you need to select which areas you want to have the best quality for the reflections. We can select the floor, the walls, the ceiling and the dining table. Increase the plane margins to the maximum. This will make this plane catch more areas of reflection until 25 centimeters, and so this way you don't need to add more reflection planes, having better performance both for working and rendering. Next is color correction, and I'll make the color temperature to about 0.2 and decrease the brightness to about 0.5. Increase the contrast to 0.7. As for the exposure, right now it's too high. Let's reduce it to 0.6. I'll add just a little bit of sharpen to about 0.2, and the sun effect is not working currently because we have the real skies effect turned on. For this scene, let's make the fog density at 1.4, the fall off at 0, almost reaching 0.1, the fog brightness increased to 0.9 and brightness to 6. Next we have real skies. I'm not making a blue hour scene, so let's replace the sky. Go to overcast and select the second sky. Now in the settings, put the heading around here and increase the brightness. The rest we'll leave it as it is. There is another effect we must add now, the global illumination. Click on the effects on the top, select lighting and choose global illumination. This will create light bounces from the artificial lighting. Click select lights, and now instead of selecting all the lights, which will make your scene quite heavy and you will have performance issues, you can select these 4 lights, and over here these 2. Increase the GI amount at the bottom and press OK. Now adjust the fall-off speed until you see the ceiling getting lit by the lights. Increase the reduce spots all the way up, and now that you are done with the global illumination, disable the preview spotlight GI and shadows. This way it saves on the performance and it will be visible on the final render. Lastly, you can add some lens imperfection effects, like the vignetting, the chromatic aberration, and the bloom effect. And remember to add a print poster enhancer, which you can find under the Tools category if you are going to render a 4K or 8K image. After you followed all these steps, you should be able to have a render that looks like this. And I recommend you checking my video about the first thing you should do before starting any project, which will help you understand how I achieve realism with my 3D renders. I'll leave a link up here and in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video.